In the winter of 1797, Wolfe Tone met Napoleon Bonaparte for the first time. And here we see a most remarkable scene in history. The greatest Irish Republican leader and the greatest military general in human history came together to plot for an invasion of Ireland to overthrow the British government and to establish an independent Irish Republic. But how exactly did this meeting come about? And why, as we all know, did Napoleon not follow through with the invasion of Ireland, choosing instead to invade Egypt? And what was Wolfe Tone's impression of this great man Napoleon Bonaparte? To answer these questions, we first have to go back to February of 1796, when Wolfe Tone first stepped foot on French shores after being exiled from Ireland. He had no money, no connections, and no knowledge of the French language. His objective was to free his country from the yoke of tyranny and to convince the French government to offer military assistance in establishing an Irish Republic. This was one of the most daring missions in Irish history, but Wolfe Tone would prove to be up for the task. Within a few months, through his skillful argumentation and persuasiveness, Tone won the support of the French government, who offered a large fleet of 43 ships, 14,000 men, led by General Hoche. And so, in the winter of 1796, the French fleet slipped past the Royal Navy and moored off the coast of southwest Ireland at Bantry Bay. However, they were battered by storms and unable to land, and they returned to France. The British regime in Ireland would live to see another day. But despite this setback, Wolfe Tone and the French were undeterred, and they began to work towards another invasion. But suddenly, General Hoche contracted tuberculosis, and he tragically died in September 1797. He was only 29 years old, and his death was a major blow to France and to Ireland. Now, after Napoleon had led his successful campaign in Italy, he was by now a legendary figure, and he returned to France. He was given the honour of succeeding General Hoche and leading the French invasion of Ireland. And so, in December 1797, he held his first meeting with Wolfe Tone to discuss the plan and the situation in Ireland. The two men met at Napoleon's house. Tone wrote in his journal that Napoleon lives in the greatest simplicity. His house is small but neat, and all the furniture and ornaments in the most classical taste. He is about 5 feet 6 inches high, slender and well made, but stoops considerably. He looks at least 10 years older than he is, owing to the great fatigues he underwent in his immortal campaign of Italy. His face is that of a profound thinker, but bears no marks of that great enthusiasm and unceasing activity by which he has been so much distinguished. It is rather, to my mind, the countenance of a mathematician than of a general. He has a fine eye and a great firmness about his mouth. He speaks low and hollow. As they discuss Irish affairs, Tone noted that Napoleon seemed a good deal uninformed. For example, he seems convinced that our population is not more than 2 millions, which is nonsense. Bonaparte listened but said very little. Tone argued that Ireland was the least defensible part of the two islands, and that Britain's naval superiority would be greatly reduced by the loss of Ireland. This would obviously be a great thing for the French, who were in a battle against the British Empire for global hegemony, and they had good reason to fear the formidable Royal Navy. Ireland was not only the main source for the essential resources of the British Navy like beef and pork, tallow, hides and various other items, but also, Tone pointed out that Ireland supplied the Navy with manpower. 2/3 of the British Navy were Irishmen, and so if Ireland was severed from Britain, she would lose this manpower, she would lose those essential resources, and as a consequence, she would be reduced to a second-rate power, and France's victory would be assured. When the meeting was finished, Napoleon asked Tone where he had learned to speak French, to which Tone replied that he learned the little he knew since arriving in France about 20 months ago, and together the two men arranged to meet again another time. Tone wrote in his journal, "As to my French, I am ignorant whether it was the purity or the barbarism of my dictation which drew his attention, and as I shall never inquire, it must remain in historical doubt, to be investigated by the learned of future ages. Now, Tone had actually achieved a remarkably high standard of French at this stage. In fact, even 1 year previous, during the Bantry Bay expedition, he was already a functional bilingual. He was translating documents and acting as an interpreter. So Napoleon was certainly impressed by Wolfe Tone's fluency in French. The future meetings of the two men more or less followed the same pattern as the first. Tone and his associates would provide Napoleon with vital information related to Ireland and information which would be pertinent to a potential invasion, and Napoleon would say very little in response. Tone wrote, "We have seen the greatest man in Europe 3 times now, and I am astonished at how little I have to record about him." But nevertheless, Tone remained optimistic, and he believed that Napoleon was acting in good faith, that he was sincere in his interest of staging an invasion of Ireland. But unfortunately, Napoleon was deceiving the Irishman who had trusted him. And in May 1798, Napoleon embarked at Toulon and set sail for Africa. The Irish expedition was used as a cover, and France would direct their real efforts towards an invasion of Egypt. That single decision transformed the fate of the earth. Years later, as he languished in exile, Napoleon reflected on this decision and he wrote, "If, instead of the expedition of Egypt, I made that of Ireland, what would England have been today, and the continent, and the political world?" Wolfe Tone knew the answer to that question, and he understood the disastrous decision that Napoleon had taken. By raising up Ireland, the power of Britain could have been crushed forever, considering how integral Ireland was to the empire and to the Royal Navy specifically in terms of resources and manpower. And it was at the hands of Britain that Napoleon ultimately fell. And interestingly, it was an Irishman who commanded the army that gave the final blow to Napoleon's destinies at the Battle of Waterloo, which was perhaps a tragic twist of fate.